Okay.
I remember the very first time that I thought of my father as a person instead of just my dad. The first time I thought of him in something in a bigger way instead of his limited role as just my father. We were living in Concord at the time, and Bud and Marilyn were living in Niles or Campbell. I remember we had gone over one Sunday afternoon and had dinner with them, and Darlene and I were in the back seat of the car. Dad was driving, and we were driving home to Concord through Niles Canyon, and just on the trip home. It was twilight. It was in the evening. It wasn't dark out. And it was a very, one of these kind of, nobody was talking. It was very comfortable silence, like after you've had a wonderful meal and a wonderful visit, and you just, I was feeling really good, and it just felt good in the car. And nobody was saying anything, and all of a sudden, Dad just burst out, and he said, "Oh, I just love visiting Bud. I always learn so much." And I was sitting right in back of Dad, and I remember looking at the back of his head, and I thought, what? He's his father. He's the one that should be teaching Bud. And I thought, and he is learning from his son? And that thought struck me so funny, because in the way I had viewed Dad, he was almost omnipotent, omniscient. You know, he was perfect in my eyes at the time. And just the thought, he just sounded so grateful, just so thrilled at the idea. And I remember thinking, gosh, what kind of a father would be so thrilled at learning from his son? And it just, I started thinking of him as a person learning from somebody else. And I remember being in awe of him at that moment. It sort of goes along with something else that I had remembered earlier, and I had not connected until just now. Dad had a really funny relationship with Bob. When I think of Bob, I sort of think of him as the family pet. You know, everyone just sort of, well, I don't know if we actually took him seriously or not, but he was sure fun to have around, like the family pet. And I'm afraid we probably didn't take him very seriously a lot of the time. But I remember, now it's not the arguments, but Dad and Bob getting in conversations with each other, and it was always so funny, because Bob was acting sometimes like a little puppy yapping at his dad, and they would be arguing about something, usually a topic, and Bob would be trying to convince Dad, and Dad would make a statement, and Bob would say, "Yeah, but," and it got to the point where Dad nicknamed him. Bob's nickname was Yabbit. He would, every once in a while, Dad said, "Hey, Yabbit." This one day, they were having a philosophical argument about something. I don't even remember what it was. But I remember Bob getting really frustrated because Dad was on this one side of this issue, and Bob was saying, "Yeah, but Dad, I remember 2 or 3 years ago when you were we were talking about this and you said such and such. And that's just exactly opposite of what you're saying now. And I remember Dad looking at Bob and saying, are you really going to hold me to what I said 3 or 4 years ago? Aren't you going to credit me at all with learning? And I remember that just stopped Bob dead in his tracks. He couldn't argue with that one. But that was another thing about Dad, is that he would always process new information and can change his mind. He wasn't stoic about something. He wasn't dogmatic in his thinking. Other things would come up and he could change his mind.